3 minutes before Clara Freeman was supposed to marry the man who could save her father's station, the church doors slammed open, and Big Isaac Dalton stood there covered in road dust, staring at her hand in another man's, before 4 reckless words silenced the room. "She's mine." Clara didn't move toward him. Beneath her wedding dress, her fist closed around the iron key to Freeman Station, the property she could lose in 3 days if its mortgage went unpaid. Isaac had vanished 4 months earlier without explaining why. Now he had returned with a leather document case under his coat, and a look that told Clara he hadn't ridden 10 hard miles just to stop her wedding. But whatever he had brought with him might already be too late. If you were Clara, would you hear him out, or finish the wedding? Tell me below, and stay with their story. 3 minutes before Clara Freeman was supposed to become another man's wife, she was holding the key to her father's station so tightly that its teeth had marked her palm. No one inside the little Juniper Wells church could see it. Her right hand rested beneath a fold of her cream-colored dress. Her left held a small bunch of dried rabbit brush and late wildflowers Louise Freeman had tied with blue thread that morning. Outside, an October wind pushed dust along the street and rattled the church windows. Winter was coming early. Clara had seen the signs at Freeman Station. Ice along the horse trough before sunrise. Freight drivers asking about hay before asking about coffee. Clouds gathering against the Toyabe Range. 3 days. That was how long remained before the mortgage note came due. 6 families earned some part of their living at the station. Teamsters depended on Willow Spring before taking the long sagebrush stretch north. Horses needed water. Wagons needed repairs. Men needed hot food and somewhere out of the wind. Clara knew every number in the station ledger. She also knew the number she could not make disappear. Jonathan Mercer could. He stood beside Reverend Peter Vaughn in a dark wool coat, his beard neatly trimmed, his boots polished despite the dust outside. Jonathan had never lied about his offer. He would pay the note. He would keep the station hands through winter. He would supply hay from his southern contracts. After the marriage, Freeman Station and the rights attached to Willow Spring would become part of their combined business. Clean, practical, safe. Clara looked at him. Jonathan gave her a small nod. She tried to return it. Instead, her eyes moved toward the church doors, again. Her mother noticed from the first pew. Louise said nothing. That made it worse. Clara pressed the key harder into her palm. She had spent months learning that numbers did not care what a person wanted. A column either balanced or it did not. Her life had stopped balancing sometime before summer ended. More than 10 miles away, Isaac Dalton bent low over the neck of a bay horse running hard down Silver Wash Freight Road. Dust streaked his coat. One sleeve was torn near the elbow. Beneath the coat, tied close against his ribs, was a leather document case. He had been gone nearly 4 months. 4 months of county books, freight offices, old receipts, bad meals, rented beds, and men who suddenly remembered less when he asked about Freeman Station. Now he had something, maybe enough. The bay stumbled where loose stone had rolled across the road. Isaac hauled the reins, shifted his weight, and kept the animal upright. His saddlebag tore loose on one side. He looked back once. Blanket, coffee, spare shirt. He cut the remaining strap with his pocket knife and let the bag fall. The papers stayed with him. Come on. The horse surged forward. Back in Juniper Wells, Reverend Vaughn opened his Bible. The church became still. Clara could hear a wagon chain tapping somewhere outside. Jonathan reached for her hand. His fingers were warm. Hers were cold. Clara Freeman, the Reverend said, do you come here of your own free will, prepared to enter this marriage? Her throat tightened. Jonathan waited. Her mother lowered her eyes. Clara looked at the door one last time. Nothing. Of course there was nothing. She had waited for Isaac once already. On the morning she needed him most, his horse had been gone from the corral before sunrise. No goodbye, no explanation, only tracks leading away from Freeman Station. Clara turned back toward Reverend Vaughn. She opened her mouth. Hoofbeats struck the street outside. Fast. Too fast for anyone arriving politely. Heads turned. Jonathan's hand tightened around hers. The hoofbeats stopped. A shadow crossed the narrow window. Then the church doors slammed open. Cold air and dust swept down the aisle. Isaac Dalton filled the doorway. At 6'7", he had always seemed too large for rooms built around ordinary men. But now he looked less imposing than exhausted. Dust covered his shoulders. His chest rose hard beneath his coat. One hand stayed pressed against the leather case hidden there. Nobody spoke. Isaac's eyes moved past Reverend Vaughn, past Jonathan. They found Clara. For 1 second, something in his face changed. Then he saw Jonathan holding her hand. The words came before judgment could stop them. "She's mine." A woman in the second pew gasped. Jonathan released Clara's hand. Reverend Vaughn slowly lowered his Bible. Isaac stood motionless, as if he had heard his own words only after everyone else had. Clara did not move toward him. She did not smile. Her fingers opened beneath the fold of her dress, revealing the red imprint left by the station key. For 4 months, she had imagined Isaac coming back. She had imagined anger, an apology, an explanation. Once on a particularly foolish night, she had even imagined running into his arms, but not this. Not after silence, not after he had left her to carry Freeman Station, her father's debts, her mother's worry, and 6 families through the approach of winter. Isaac took 1 step into the church. Clara's eyes stopped him. Whatever warmth had been there was gone, and for the first time that morning, Big Isaac Dalton looked like a man who understood. He might have arrived just in time to stop a wedding, and far too late to reclaim the woman he loved. Nobody in the church moved. Jonathan Mercer was the first to find his voice. "Mr. Dalton, you will explain yourself." Barely seemed to hear him. His eyes stayed on Clara, then he looked down at his own hands, rough from rains and cold weather, and something like regret crossed his face. "No," he said. The word carried through the church. Isaac reached inside his coat and removed the leather document case. "You're not mine." Clara's chin lifted slightly. Isaac crossed the aisle, but he stopped several feet from her. Men shifted on the pews. Reverend Vaughn watched him carefully. Everyone in Juniper Wells knew what Big Isaac could do when anger got ahead of him. Isaac did not raise his fists. He laid the document case beside the Bible. "But that debt may not be yours either." That changed the room. Clara stared at him. "What are you talking about? Open it." She hesitated, then pulled the leather flap loose. Inside were folded copies from county books, 2 freight receipts, and a sheet covered in Isaac's cramped handwriting. Clara knew numbers. She forgot the watching congregation and carried the papers to the window. Jonathan stepped closer. Clara ran 1 finger down the figures. Then she did it again. The mortgage amount filed against Freeman Station was higher than the balance recorded in her father's last ledger. Not by a few dollars. By enough to matter. "Where did you get this?" "County records in Austin. Then freight offices farther south." Her eyes snapped toward him. "You've been gone 4 months," Isaac swallowed. "Yes." 4 months earlier, he had been repairing the north stable roof at Freeman Station, while Clara stood below, handing him square nails from her apron pocket. They had worked that way often after her father died. A broken gate, a wagon sunk to its hubs in Silverwash, a sick remount horse that kept both of them awake until dawn. There had been no courtship anyone could point to. Just coffee left waiting on a fence post, her hand resting a moment too long in his when he helped her from a wagon. Isaac looking up whenever Clara laughed. Then one evening, he had noticed figures in her father's ledger that did not agree with a payment notice. Clara had been tired, frightened, and already defending the station from men who assumed grief had made her incapable. So now you think Papa couldn't keep his own books? I think somebody counted on nobody checking them. She had shut the ledger. Isaac should have stayed. Instead, before sunrise, he saddled his horse and followed the paper trail without telling her. Clara had awakened to an empty corral rail and tracks disappearing south. Now he stood before her again. I can explain. She folded the county copy carefully. You had 4 months. Clara, you had 4 months to explain. Her voice never rose. That made Isaac stop faster than shouting would have. Clara turned to Jonathan. I cannot marry you today. His jaw tightened, but he gave one slow nod. If the debt is wrong, we determine that first. It was not tenderness, but it was fair. Clara appreciated him for that, which somehow made the ruined wedding harder. She handed Reverend Vaughn the flowers, walked past Isaac, and left the church under her own power. Isaac did not follow. By evening, everyone in Juniper Wells had heard some version of what happened. Isaac rented the narrow room above Cole's livery. For the next several nights, he stayed there. He did not ride to Freeman Station. He did not send a message through Louise. He did not appear at Clara's door asking forgiveness. But he did not disappear either. From her bedroom window, Clara could see the town lamps 2 miles down the road when the night was clear. One lamp burned beside the livery. Beneath it stood Isaac's bay horse, night after night, still there. On the 4th evening, Clara carried her father's ledger to the kitchen table. A coal oil lamp hissed beside her. Coffee had gone cold in a tin cup near her elbow. She compared Isaac's papers against her father's figures until her eyes ached. The first mortgage was wrong. There was no longer much doubt, but Clara did not look relieved. Instead, she rose and crossed to the cupboard. Louise watched from beside the stove. Clara reached behind a stack of folded table linen and took down her father's old iron-bound strongbox. She unlocked it. Beneath a deed, 3 tax receipts, and a bundle of letters tied with string lay a folded paper she had hoped never to unfold again. She carried it back to the lamp. Her father's signature sat at the bottom. Real. She knew every turn of it. Above that signature was a second promissory note. Clara read the amount once, then again. Her thumb stopped on the paper. Even if Isaac proved every dollar of the first mortgage false, this one was large enough to take Freeman Station, large enough to take Willow Spring with it. And Silas Grady held the note. Clara kept the paper under the lamp until the flame began to smoke. Louise came to the table and rested one hand on the chair across from her. You knew about this? Clara nodded once. 3 weeks. Her mother sat down slowly. Outside, a wagon rolled past the station toward the north road. The iron tires clicked over frozen ruts, then faded into the dark. Clara opened another folded sheet. Her father's letter. He had never mailed it. The paper was worn soft along the creases. He had written about the winter 3 years earlier, when Willow Spring froze shallow, the bridge washed out, and hay prices doubled before Christmas. He had borrowed again to keep freight moving, repair the crossing, and feed the station horses. Clara had read the letter so many times she no longer needed the lamp. He thought he could pay it back by spring, she said. Louise looked at the second note. And Jonathan? He was the only man willing to quit before Grady moved. That was the truth she had not told anyone. Not Isaac, not her mother, not even Jonathan in full. She had chosen the marriage after adding columns late into the night and finding no way to save the station without outside money. The next morning, Isaac came to Freeman Station. He stopped at the porch instead of walking in. Clara saw him through the front window. Big Isaac Dalton, hat in hand, standing like a visitor at a place where he once knew every loose board. She opened the door. I need to show you something. He followed her to the kitchen. She placed the second note between them. Isaac read it. His shoulders went still. For a moment, Clara saw the old instinct rise in him. He looked toward the window where his horses were tied. I could sell. He stopped. Clara closed the strongbox. Isaac looked at her again. Then he pulled out the chair opposite hers and sat down. What do you want to do? The question hung there, small, simple, different. Clara studied him before answering. I want to know what Grady really owns. By noon, they had their answer. Deputy Eli Porter rode in with a folded notice tucked inside his coat. Silas Grady had filed for foreclosure on the second note. 48 hours after that, unless Clara contested the claim, Freeman Station could be seized. The notice was nailed beside the office door. Every station hand saw it. By afternoon, 2 freight drivers had already asked whether the water troughs would remain open through winter, so evening, worse news arrived. Grady had bought most of the loose hay still available between Juniper Wells and the southern ranches. Men who had worked for Clara's father for years began looking at one another across the yard. Nobody said they were leaving, not yet, but bedrolls began appearing near saddles. The next day, one of Grady's hired men rode in before breakfast. His name was Boyd Keller. He leaned against the corral gate while Clara checked a feed tally. 48 hours goes quick, he said. Clara ignored him. Keller stepped closer. You might want to start packing. Get off my property, he smiled. Then he bumped her shoulder as he passed. Not hard, hard enough. The yard went quiet. Isaac was near the forge, lifting a wagon tongue with Warren Pike. He set it down. Keller turned towards him. Well? Isaac crossed the yard. Every step made the hired man's smile thinner. Clara watched Isaac's right hand close, once tight, then open again. He stopped within arm's reach. Keller raised his chin. Thought Big Isaac had more fight in him. Isaac looked past him. Deputy Eli Porter had just ridden through the gate. Isaac stepped aside. Mr. Keller's been asked to leave. The deputy dismounted. Keller looked from one man to the other, saw no fight waiting for him, and spat into the dust. Then he left. Nobody laughed. Nobody cheered. But Warren Pike looked at Isaac differently, so did the station hands. Late that afternoon, another rider appeared from town, Jonathan Mercer. Clara met him on the porch. He did not remove his gloves. I found something. He handed her a telegram. Clara read the first line, then the second. Jonathan's company name had been used in the purchase of the original mortgage. Without his authorization, he had been used too. There's more, Jonathan said. He handed Isaac a thin packet of old freight records. One entry mentioned reimbursement for repairs to Willow Creek Bridge, paid to Clara's father. Isaac looked at Clara. If that money had been credited properly, it could reduce the second note. Maybe enough to stop Grady. Clara turned the page, a wagon number, a date, a freight association mark, then one penciled notation in her father's hand. Black Juniper Ridge. She looked toward the mountains. The first snow had already begun gathering along the high line. By dawn, Clara had packed coffee, biscuits, a coil of rope, 2 wool blankets, and the old ledger into a canvas sack. Isaac found her tightening the cinch on a chestnut mare. You're going. I'm finding that record. He glanced toward Black Juniper Ridge. The sky above it had gone the color of tin. I'll come with you. Clara did not thank him. She only handed him the spare reins. They took a small freight wagon because the abandoned relay cabin sat beyond a stretch where carrying ledgers on horseback would be risky if the weather turned. For the first 2 hours, neither spoke much. Wheels creaked over frozen ruts. Sagebrush brushed the wagon bed. Isaac kept watching the clouds. Clara kept watching the road. Near noon, one horse began favoring its left foreleg. Isaac climbed down and checked the hoof. Shoes loose. He pulled a small hammer from the toolbox. Clara held the horse steady while he worked. His fingers were red from cold. You always carry half a blacksmith shop? Only when I travel with you. She looked at him. He almost smiled. Almost. They moved on. The road narrowed as it climbed. Snow began as small, dry grains, then thickened until the wagon tracks disappeared behind them. At a wash crossing, the left wheel dropped hard into a rut. The axle cracked. The sound was sharp enough to stop both horses. Clara climbed down. Isaac crouched beside the wheel. Can you brace it for a while? He found a length of timber beneath the wagon bed and began cutting it to fit. Clara watched him work. Months earlier, she would have let the silence stand. This time she did not. You thought leaving without telling me was protecting me. Isaac kept sawing. Yes, that wasn't protection. No. He stopped. Snow collected on his shoulders. I thought if I told you what I suspected, you'd tell me not to go. I might have. I know. And you decided that meant I shouldn't get to choose. Isaac looked down at the broken axle. Yes, the word came quietly. Clara folded her arms against the cold. I did my share too. He looked up. I spent so long proving I could run the station without anyone that I started treating help like an insult. Isaac said nothing. Clara's breath showed white between them. I didn't want to owe anybody, especially me, especially you. He nodded once. No argument, no defense. That made it harder to stay angry. They reached the relay cabin just before dark. The roof sagged on one side, and wind pushed snow through a crack near the door. Inside were mouse-chewed blankets, an iron stove, and 3 warped shelves of old freight books. Clara lit a lantern. They searched by dates, one ledger after another. Then she found the association mark. Her hands stopped. Sack. He came beside her. The entry listed the Willow Creek Bridge repair, materials, labor, wagon number, and repayment. Clara turned another page. There it was, a freight receipt signed by her father. Money received. Money that should have reduced the debt, but never had. Isaac let out a breath. This could stop him, if we get it filed. They left before sunrise. The snow was worse. By the time they reached the broken wagon, only one horse was moving cleanly enough to make Juniper Wells at speed. Clara looked toward town, then at Isaac. He looked at the horse. Months ago, he would already have been in the saddle. This time he stayed where he was. Is this what you want me to do? Clara held his eyes. Then I'll go. He took the ledger copy, the receipt, and the county papers. Clara closed his fingers around them. Don't lose those, I won't. Isaac mounted and rode. Clara watched until snow swallowed him. At the county recorder's office, Isaac arrived minutes before closing. His horse was lathered and trembling. He pushed through the door with snow on his coat and laid the papers on the counter. Silas Grady was already there, so was Deputy Porter. The recorder examined the receipt, then the ledger entry. For one brief moment, Grady's expression changed. Then he smiled. Mr. Dalton, he said, Freeman Station isn't yours. Isaac said nothing. Grady turned to the recorder. The property owner must contest the foreclosure herself. The recorder's face tightened. That is correct. Isaac stared at the papers. He had reached the office. He had brought the proof. And none of it gave him the right to speak for Clara. The recorder reached for the seizure papers. Outside, wagon wheels struck the frozen street. Everyone turned. A snow-covered wagon stopped at the curb. Clara climbed down alone. Her coat was white at the shoulders. Her hands shook from cold, but she was still carrying her father's ledger against her chest. Isaac crossed half the room before stopping himself. Clara came to the counter and opened the book. Then her face changed. A jagged strip of paper showed near the binding. One page had been torn out. For a moment, no one in the recorder's office spoke. Silas Grady looked almost pleased. Clara did not. She turned the ledger sideways, studied the torn edge, then set it flat on the counter. I don't need that page to tell you what came before it. Grady gave a small laugh. You expect a county office to stop a lawful foreclosure because of missing arithmetic? No. Clara opened the freight receipt Isaac had brought. I expect it to stop because the arithmetic isn't missing. She pointed to the amount paid for the Willow Creek Bridge repair, then to the original mortgage, then to Jonathan Mercer's ledger. The room narrowed to paper, ink, and numbers. Clara moved through them one by one. The bridge reimbursement appeared in the Freight Association record. Her father had signed for it, but the amount had never been credited against the balance Grady now claimed. The recorder leaned closer. Jonathan stepped forward. My company name was used in the first mortgage purchase, he said, but not under the terms I authorized. Grady's face hardened. You'd better be certain. I am. The door opened again. Warren Pike came in carrying his hat. Snow melted off his coat onto the floorboards. I worked that bridge with her father, he said. 3 days in freezing water. He was paid back for the materials and labor. Deputy Porter looked at the recorder. The recorder looked again at the papers. Then he pushed the seizure order aside. I'm staying the foreclosure pending review. Grady's jaw tightened. On incomplete records, on conflicting records, disputed accounting, and testimony enough to require investigation. Clara finally let out the breath she had been holding. Not relief. Not yet. Just enough air to stand straight. Grady turned toward her. You can end this now. Clara looked at him. He named a price for Freeman Station and Willow Spring. High enough to pay every debt. High enough to buy another place farther south. High enough to make the winter easy. Sell, Grady said, and none of this follows you. Clara looked toward Isaac. He stood near the wall, too large for the room and somehow careful not to fill it. Months ago, he would have stepped in. He would have told Grady no. He would have tried to carry the weight himself. This time he only said, whatever you choose, I'll still be here tomorrow. Clara looked back at Grady. No. His expression barely changed. She closed her father's ledger. Freeman Station stays mine. By the end of the week, Clara had agreements with 3 wagon masters to keep Willow Spring open through winter. Jonathan arranged hay at cost from a southern supplier. Warren helped repair the feed shed roof before the next snow. Isaac went back to his horses. He did not move into Freeman Station. He did not speak as though saving it had been his victory. He simply remained nearby. Through December, he fixed a gate that dragged after hard frost. In January, Clara left a ledger open on the kitchen table while he drank coffee across from her. In February, they began sitting together on the porch again. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they did not. By early spring, the snow had pulled back from the lower slopes. One afternoon, Clara found Isaac replacing a broken fence rail near the east pasture. He looked up as she approached. Need something? Yes. He waited. Clara folded her arms. Do you remember what you shouted in that church? Isaac closed his eyes. I've been trying not to. She's mine. The 4 stupidest words of my life. Clara almost smiled. Then say it right. Isaac set down the hammer. He pulled off his gloves, then he walked toward her. 1 step, 2. He stopped before getting too close. Clara Freeman. His voice was steady, but his hands were not. Would you choose me? She looked at him for a long moment. Then she crossed the space he had left between them. Her hand slid into his. I was waiting for you to learn how to ask. Isaac lowered his head. This time he did not take anything. He waited until she leaned toward him. Then he kissed her, softly. No church full of witnesses, no shouting, no deadline. just wind moving through the sagebrush and the sound of horses shifting beyond the fence. Later that afternoon, a freight driver new to Juniper Wells pulled into Freeman Station and watched Isaac leading a remount horse across the yard. "That big fellow work for you?" he asked Clara. She looked through the office window. Isaac glanced up. Their eyes met. He smiled. Clara turned back to the driver. "No," she said. "He stands with me." And maybe that was the truest thing Clara Freeman ever said about Isaac Dalton. He did not stand in front of her anymore. He did not disappear down some distant road believing love meant carrying every burden alone. He stood with her. Freeman Station remained hers. Willow Spring kept watering tired horses and freight teams headed north. And when the evening light settled across the sagebrush, Clara could sometimes look through the window and see Isaac working beyond the fence. The same enormous cowboy who had once burst through a church door believing 4 reckless words could settle what his heart had failed to say. They couldn't. Love had required harder words. "What do you want? Is this your choice? Will you forgive me? Would you choose me?" Clara had learned something too. Strength did not always mean refusing every hand offered to you. Sometimes dignity was knowing the difference between someone trying to own your choices and someone willing to honor them. Perhaps that is what their story leaves behind. A second chance means very little if we return as the same person who walked away. Sometimes love survives not because somebody rides fast enough to stop the wrong ending, but because two people become brave enough to build a better one. If you had been Clara, would you have given Isaac another chance? Share your answer in the comments. And if stories of the Old West, stories of love, hidden truths, hard choices, and people finding their way home mean something to you, subscribe and stay with us. There are still many roads ahead, and another story is waiting somewhere beyond the next ridge.